Awesome. Why don't you just roll right into it? I mean, when we started chatting initially, um, you had first of all we connected down at Winter Management, which is a great place to connect. But then we chatted a couple weeks ago, and you mentioned how you got into the insurance business, which is kind of interesting story. Why don't you share that?
Sure. Well, yeah, thanks for having this conversation with me. I appreciate being on with you. Yeah, my background, I actually went to school for forestry and worked as an arborist in the county park system in Wisconsin for a little bit. Felt the reality of real life after 4 months when I got cut from my job due to budget cuts and had to go looking for another job. So I joined my father in his insurance agency at that time and started focusing on the business insurance side. He was more home and auto insurance. So there was an opening in our agency to start doing that. And naturally, I gravitated towards tree services because that's what I knew and liked and wanted to still be connected somehow. Ended up being the perfect marriage for me. Really blending the two together was an area that was underserved for the tree care industry and allowed me to fulfill my passions of helping the industry just in a totally different way than I initially had thought. So we work with over 300 tree care companies now across 38 states. So I guess that was 22 years ago, Jeff.
Yeah.
So it goes fast. Um, but yeah, I'm really thankful to have all that time and opportunities to be able to just work with tree services.
Yeah. Um, when you start talking to a potential new customer, what are the um, actually maybe let me ask you, like, what are the misconceptions that folks have about the insurance industry? What are you teaching them?
Sure.
Um, what's the yeah, there's got to be some, insurance is a black box of a mystery wrapped in an enigma, right? Like it's just kind of like, I
Sure.
don't know, I pay these people money and I don't know, so like what is your education process? What are the misconceptions that you typically run into?
Sure. Yeah, great question. I would say the very first thing is insurance is there really as it's a non-tangible product. It's a service to pay back something if something goes wrong. So it's hard to grasp that concept. But really, ultimately, what I want my clients and people that I talk to understand is, to me, insurance, it's not risk management, and it's just part of risk management. And that's, I think, the biggest message I try to portray to people is if you're doing everything you can to prevent injuries and accidents from happening within your company, you're practicing risk management. You might not know it technically or any of the terms that, say risk analysis and all that stuff, right? But you're practicing risk management. And ultimately, if you're doing that, you're going to lower your insurance cost because you're going to have less claims, you're going to have less accidents. So I want people to think that just buying insurance is not risk management. It's doing all the other things, including buying insurance, but it's doing all those other things first, and maybe not first, but continuously, that allow insurance premiums that you're paying to be lower and more reasonable. And because again, you're buying a promise it's not like you're grabbing it out of the box. You can't touch it, you can't feel it. You're just buying something that's going to hopefully be there when you need it. So I want people to know that there's a big part that you need to take on yourself and do it proactively in the beginning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. What about when you review kind of the history of, like, hey, they were, company was insured by XYZ other um, carrier, or maybe just like a local group that doesn't have a deep understanding of the tree service industry. What are the common things that you end up like adjusting with their policy to either get them better coverage for the bad moments, the like when a claim happens, so there's better coverage, or just like things that aren't necessarily needed in like your run-of-the-mill type of thing,
Mhm.
that like how do you like right size? What are the things you like add or subtract from like your standard small
Sure.
business contracting policy specifically for tree care businesses?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. Probably the biggest coverage actually that we don't see a lot of tree care companies have is professional liability. And that's really in any tree job, there's an element of our professional advice that we're giving.
Mm,
Whether that's going to be, do this with this branch or don't do that to this tree, or, however that plays out, there's always that, you get called on the job site because you're the expert. Either a certified arborist, board certified master arborist, a track, or whatever. Even if you don't have a credential, you're still the professional that your customer is depending on. So the professional liability is basically like medical malpractice for a doctor. It covers you if you make a mistake. And where we see it happening, like claims being paid out, is if you cut the wrong tree down. That happens more than we all like to admit. It's paid out under a professional liability policy.
mm,
Um, there'll be times when maybe you didn't go into the backyard because the homeowner called you about the tree in the front yard, but the backyard is declining big time. And if that tree fails and injures a child or the neighbor dog or whatever it might be, you could be brought into a professional liability lawsuit because you didn't talk to them about that.
mm,
It sounds crazy, but people sue people for everything all the time. And if you were the certified arborist that was on site and you didn't say anything about that, they're going to try to hold your feet to the fire with it. So professional liability is definitely one you should take a look at. Other thing that we're doing more of is broadened auto pollution. So when we're driving to the job sites, we have, bar oil, chainsaw fuel, we have plant healthcare chemicals, perhaps. We're driving to the job site with all of these pollutants on our truck. If we get in an accident, we overturn and we dump all those other chemicals into the groundwater, you have a potential for a pollution event from a remediation standpoint. And most in standard insurance policies don't cover that.
mm.
They'll cover the diesel fuel and the hydraulic operating fluid for your dump body, and they'll cover the stuff that their vehicle operates off of. But when we put chemicals or liquids onto our vehicle that doesn't work the machinery, or that doesn't, you don't need it to operate the vehicle, that's where you can come into play with that. So those are two big things we look at. The other thing is making sure your policy from a general liability standpoint actually covers your operations correctly.
Mm.
So many times we see tree care companies listed as landscapers. And in those policies, there's exclusions perhaps for crane work. And if you're renting a crane or if you own a crane and you have an exclusion for crane work on your policy, simply that is what it means. You're excluded from coverage for any crane work. Well, that's a big deal, potentially. So
Yeah.
it's making sure your policy actually is intended and right sized, to use your words, for your operations and have your operations listed on there. Also, if you're talking about landscape policies and you're doing tree work, you might sell firewood and mulch. You might be making urban lumber. That's cool. That's great. Those are all things that we want to make sure are listed in there um, from the details, from the small fine print in the policy.
So you mentioned when we were chatting, I don't know, a week or two ago about a little bit more of a holistic view, and we were talking a little bit about your underwriting process, and sometimes you are able to do an in-person visit, a lot of times not, just due to all of the things that have to go on there to make that happen. But maybe talk a little bit about you had some insights about like what insurance is and what risk is.
Mhm.
Um, Maybe I'll leave it as an open-ended question for you to pick up the pieces on there. But I
Yeah,
thought that you had
sure.
some interesting insights. This is just a
Mhm.
different way of thinking about it that I hadn't considered. That might be interesting to dive into.
Yeah, I think taking a step back to that point about risk management, um, in the whole risk management process, a number of things you want to do, but identifying what could possibly go wrong in your business. And that could be from your people, what can they do to other people versus what can happen to them. Vehicles, how, what you can do causing damage, like the pollution event or whatever that might be. So thinking about what can go wrong certainly is the first step, but more importantly to me is how can we in the front end, put in some policies and procedures, put in some extra effort to avoid an injury and accident from happening. When we do get an injury and an accident, it makes everything so much more costly. It changes our productivity. It changes everything about the business and the job at that point. So doing everything you can to prevent injuries and accidents is the starting point, and really working with a risk management advisor or an insurance agent that's going to help you prevent injuries and accidents is key. And with that, I would say from an insurance coverage standpoint, if the person you're working with understands those different operations that you're doing, can give you guidance on if you start going into plant healthcare, here's what you need to be looking out for, from a PPE standpoint, all the way to a licensing or certification standpoint with whatever state you're in. And then also to the insurance coverage side, it kind of flushes out that whole, your risk management needs to be part of the business strategy and not just seeing it as an opportunity to, do something new and not think about the consequences, but let's do something new. Let's take that positive risk, but let's do it in a structured way that helps us control that growth and do it within a manageable way and
Yeah.
making more conscious decisions. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, it does. And you had some stats that you threw out on like the most common claims. I think that was maybe one of the questions.
Yeah.
I think the surprising stat was traffic accidents
Yeah.
was like 36 or 39%. What was the other one that you threw out there?
Yeah, you're good. So we did a 3-year analysis of the claims that all of our tree care companies filed. So this was our data over a 3-year period, and 40% of the claims were injuries, workers' comp, which seems about right. Thankfully, a lot of them have been smaller, but some of them are bigger, but 40% were injuries. And then those 38% were auto accidents. So almost the same percentage is coming from the vehicles than it is from on the job injuries.
Mm,
And then general liability was 16%. So if you look at those three areas, general liability, your workers' comp, your safety, and then your auto side, you basically cover, what is that? Almost 80, 90% of the claims that you're going to face in your, daily life. Um, if we can help you, you can help yourself benefit and get those three areas better. Oh man, you're going to be so much more of a profitable company. You're going to run more efficient. You're going to have more fun. You're going to have less headaches. So the auto accident side, 36 or 38% of those claims, that's a big number. And I think as an industry, we've done a great job of limiting the on the job injuries with safety training and all the fun presentations and the demo trees at all the conferences and all the things that we all like to go to and see. But we have not done a good job of the auto side of things. An arborist is a trucker before they're an arborist. There's
hmm
no question about it. They got to get to the job site. The job doesn't happen in their shop, it happens out in the field. So I really am trying to encourage tree care owners to promote driving training, do better at checking MVRs, driving records, and setting a guideline for your employees. Like, this is what we accept. This is what we want you to hold yourself accountable to on your personal driving record so that you can drive for us. And also, just simply testing them. I use this example all the time. When I worked at the park system, I got my CDL. That was 22 years ago. I have kept my CDL because I don't want to let it lapse, right?
hmm
I haven't driven a commercial truck in 22 years. But if I needed to, I could walk into any tree service with that piece of plastic and get a job almost right away.
Right.
And if I don't tell them, or if they don't test me, they'd throw me the keys and I'd drive away. And I probably wouldn't be as good of a driver as I should be operating that massive piece of equipment.
Yeah. Yeah, not all CDL drivers are created
Yeah,
equal. It's maybe another way to say it. Right.
for
So there's
sure.
like rustiness, but then there's also just like
Both,
skill,
right?
right?
For sure.
Just,
So
yeah.
if you're not testing me, how are you going to stand in the court of law and defend yourself saying, well, he had the piece of plastic, okay, yeah, he did, but you didn't test him on the operation of the equipment. You didn't, have any future driver training. You didn't even look at his driving record. At
Yeah.
that point, your defense in that liability lawsuit, if I kill somebody, you're toast.
Yeah.
You're losing that with big dollars.
Yeah. Yeah. And we talked about, and this is no commercial for the groundwork side of things, but we talked about just like hours on the road, right? Like that's some of
Yeah,
what our stuff does is help you
right.
stay off the road a little bit, which has not just a time savings, but just like a potential insurance,
Yes.
hours on the road computational effort,
Mhm.
which was kind of a light bulb moment for me of
Mhm.
um, we talk a lot about that of just time and effort for, a sales arborist or even a small crew if they're doing some quotes, it's just stop by type of stuff. Man,
Yeah.
that's yes, it's time and like our whole, all of our stuff was talking about that, but like there is risk involved with every
Yep.
time you put your foot on the gas. It is there is some risk involved there, which is kind of a neat insight.
We had a customer, I'm sorry to interrupt. We had a
Oh, go.
customer 15 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, that the owner of the company was driving his little small Ford Fusion as a sales vehicle. He was distracted. I don't know if it was a call or what was coming into him. He was distracted and he rear-ended a lady and she needed 3 neck surgeries.
Oh,
It was $1 million claim and it happened by the owner in the sales vehicle going to or from an estimate, not one of their, bucket trucks going down the road,
right,
not buying an employee's,
right.
negligence. It was the owner, and it caused him big pain on the insurance later too. Thankfully, the limits of coverage that he had was enough for the injury, and there wasn't anything beyond that, thankfully.
Mhm.
But the lady suffered, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, the
yeah,
estimating part of it is there's risk putting being on the road. And
yeah.
if you have more miles, more hours, you have more risk.
Yeah, and we hear folks doing 12, 15 estimates in a day, and obviously that's not always feasible in certain geographies, but man, oh man, what a grind, right?
Sure.
Just from a fatigue perspective, I have a hard enough time keeping track of like my meeting schedule,
Yeah.
and I'm not doing 15 in a day, so there's yeah, it's an interesting way to think about the risk associated with even just the sales process, right? Like everything has risks.
Yeah.
You just gotta be smart about how you're thinking about it. Let me ask you about a bit about technology. What have you seen? And some of these things may be like, we don't know quite yet, but like there's a lot of new technology out there, whether it be, some of the battery powered equipment, some of the new, heavier machinery that, folks are utilizing. Um, and then just some business process stuff, kind of like a little bit more like what we're doing. What aspects are like affect how a business is insured, how insurable, or what the rates may be
Mhm.
based on different kind of like emerging technologies that are out there.
Sure. Yeah, it's a deep question, no doubt.
Yeah.
From the operations standpoint, the more mechanization that we're seeing in the tree care industry has led to reduced general liability rates because if it's operated safe, correctly, it's safer and less damage to the properties as their branches are being able to be lowered down. Um, However, insurance costs on those pieces of equipment are expensive.
Mm.
And a lot of times it's the auto accident of that big grapple truck that causes the insurance pain on the road. So while mechanization has been great for workers' comp and general liability, it's negatively impacted on the auto because of bigger claims when they do wreck, when they do get in an accident. That being said, from the auto standpoint, again, telematics, forward and rear facing dash cams have been very useful and helpful for insurance companies to offer discounts up front. And then also on the back end, if there is a claim, an accident, you can really see what happened. A good example, we had a client in the summer had a cab facing and a forward facing dash cam. Employee had his both hands on the wheel. He was singing, but he was watching. He was singing to the music. He was watching. It was wet out, and he slid slowly and bumped the guy in front of him. The guy got out, screamed at him, right? But 2 days later, hired an attorney and now was trying to sue for bodily injury. Well, you could see it was their fault, right? He rear-ended them, no question about that. But you could tell it was, he wasn't distracted, he wasn't on a cell phone, he wasn't eating, he wasn't doing things like that. And you could see the impact was minor, and you could see the other guy jump out and flail his arms and move around, and it just is going. It's not resolved because there's attorneys involved, and that was in the summer, so only a few months ago. But it's going to help tremendously because they had that technology. Now, on the flip side, if you have a telematics program and you're not following up on the data that you're getting, so if Jeff, you're doing hard stops and fast breaks and bad turns and all that, and I'm your manager and I see that, and I don't pull you aside and give you better training or, reprimand you or whatever it might be, I don't do anything with it. Now I've actually created more liability for the company because if again you get in a bad accident and the defense attorney or the plaintiff's attorney comes in and says, "Hey, well, you knew Jeff was a crappy driver, but you let him keep going back out there," you're kind of stuck. So I think with any technology, there's pros and cons, but with the mechanization, with some of the technology you can put in vehicles, you can run a really lean and mean company and be very risk adverse by doing it the right way, the conscious way of trying to avoid some of those things. So yeah,
Do you see management and ownership of these of tree service businesses hesitate on the telematics
yeah.
because of that risk of knowing? It sounds weird, but I
I
can
think the risk is more not
imagine.
wanting to feel big brother-ish.
Mm,
And that's, I think, what stops more tree care
yeah,
companies from putting it in. I, the reason I mention it is I want them to be aware of the increased risk if you don't use it. And I,
yeah.
I don't think that's why people aren't putting it in. Perhaps there are people that aren't doing it because they don't know how to manage the information, but you can take that stuff, you give it to your insurance agent, you can get a discount or credit on your business auto policy for doing these things. And that's what's great about it from my side. But it is a show me, prove it. You can't just say I'm doing it, prove it. Show me your invoice, show me how you're actually monitoring it, show me a driver safety meeting or a tailgate safety meeting that you talked about it. If we can prove it to the insurance company, now we got something there.
Hmm. Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So let's maybe transition a little bit to um, your role as a TCI board member. How long have you been on the board?
This is just the start of my second year.
Okay.
So
All right. So maybe not quite. I mean, obviously, it's always a honeymoon period with TCIA, but there's you've been in it, right? And you've been in the industry for a long time. What have you seen over the last handful of years? And maybe this is less of an association question, but maybe a little bit more of, because you are involved and have been involved, what are some of the largest changes you've seen, in the past like handful of years, and what do you expect to see in the next handful of years? Maybe it's more the same, maybe it's something a little bit different. I'm interested just for your like general
sure.
industry perspective of like what is new. Like we talk about innovation, and it's kind of like this term we throw around, but like what is changing?
Yeah. Well, from a TCIA perspective, I'll answer that first. I'm very
Sure.
excited. Last year, the staff has been working really hard on reframing the actual value proposition of the membership into what we call the six domains. The six domains, I think, is just easier for TCIA staff to interact with the members based on that. What
Hmm.
Jeff do you need in your tree care company? Is it marketing? Is it safety? Is it workforce development? Are you interested in more advocacy at the legislation level? So the six domains really has helped with that. I think it makes it easier to grasp what TCIA does. So I commend them for doing that. And that was started a number of years ago. It's a big deal to make it
Yeah.
smooth and streamlined. So that's, I think, the biggest thing at TCI level. And hopefully the members are starting to see those words and starting to connect with the areas that they really feel they want to improve upon. Because on a broader scale, I am seeing the industry, while it is a small industry in the whole scheme of life, it is still a broad industry with a lot of different segments, a little different factors, and a lot of other associations that play a part. And I am seeing it actually become smaller in the fact of we're talking together, and I'm talking generally, industries and other groups are being more interconnected and having better conversations on how everybody fits together. And that can be from the National Association of Landscape Professionals, NALP,
Yep.
to TCIA, to ISA, to the Tree Fund, and all those different organizations, I think are actually talking together better than they ever have. And that will make us stronger as a whole unit. One of the things TCIA has been pushing for years is its own OSHA standard.
Mm,
And there's hope now that we can actually push it across the finish line. It's been a 20-year labor of love to try to get this really done so that we can be recognized at the federal level for having our own profession.
mm,
And therefore, that ties in with the apprenticeship programs that have been going around in the state. I'm fortunate and proud to be part of Wisconsin, where we started the first apprenticeship program. A lot of great minds went into building that program, and then it was duplicated at the national level, and some states have taken it on their own. But that's another way, along with the OSHA standard, that us as an industry can really connect to the general public on this is a profession. This isn't just a job. There are multiple ways you can get into this industry and multiple things you can do with the industry for your career. And I think as a general, where is this industry going? It's ultimately professionalizing even more, becoming more recognized by the local and federal governments that allows that the guidance counselor to understand that, hey, this is a profession that I think a lot of my, students should be interested in or should go to. And that's the exciting part for me is seeing how it builds from the ground up and really it's that's why you're around the tree
yeah.
guys. It's a
Yeah.
fantastic industry, and it's one why I didn't want to leave and just work on some general insurance. I wanted to be part of it
Right.
because of the people, because of what they do. And one of my mentors, Jim Skira, who used to be the ISA executive director, he always will say, people will always live around trees. And trees always need care, and the arborists are the ones that care for those trees. So this industry will change, it will ebb, it will flow, but it's not going away. The moment people stop wanting trees by their homes and in their, communities, that's when it goes away. But that's not going to happen. That's not
Yeah.
going to happen. We value trees even more now as a society. So that's what I'm excited about as a general industry. And I think as we professionalize more, the true professionals become more important in that whole conversation.
Yeah. Do you, if you were to, um, when a podcast I listen to, they have an annual prediction show, and it's pretty hilarious. It's a group of guys that just kind of, they just got a really good rapport because they're all friends. But they have an annual prediction show about a lot of different random things. They have
Right.
like, oh, what's the most likely this or that, or like what, it's kind of wide ranging, but maybe I'll ask you to make a prediction.
All right.
Um, and this was not on our prep, so you know, buckle in. If you were to predict one of the, any of the challenges that you hear from your companies that you work with or from your spot on the board at TCIA, um, what challenge do you think is going to be most solved or as technology or other trends that you see, what is like the thing that you see moving most quickly towards resolution that people are like, oh man, this stinks right now, where do you see things like accelerating to address some of those key challenges that people are facing right now?
Well, here's what I want to say. I want to
Yeah,
say
let's do
that
that. Perfect.
as an industry, we can figure out the marketing of our industry as a profession to help our workforce issue. And
Mm.
when I say issue, lack of workforce.
Hmm.
That is probably the biggest concern that almost everybody has. I ask the simple question when I'm talking to clients or prospects is, do you have more jobs or do you need more jobs or more employees? And almost everybody without a fail says, I need more employees. I would love to be able to, as an industry, through the apprenticeship, through the industry standards, through all the things that we're trying to do kind of in our own little silos, make such an impact that people know that this is the profession to be outside, to play with equipment. If even if you're a techie and you want to play with joysticks, you can run equipment. If you want to, hoof yourself up the tree, it's here. If you want to play
Right.
science with chemicals and all of that and research, it's here. I really want to, again, promote the industry as the profession that it is. Um, that's a big challenge. A prediction is, can we make that go away? I think that takes a lot of effort on a lot of people's plate. So that's probably not the answer to the question, but that's
No, I think that's, I mean, I'm asking the question just to hear a little bit more of the way that you're thinking about the future. I think that a little nugget there is great. And just for what it's worth, from the groundwork side of things, we've worked with companies in all sorts of different industries, and I would say almost all of them have this problem,
right.
right? I think what's maybe the most interesting um, is the passion that I see in the tree service industry from those who want to be, certified arborists and like there's more, I would say more of a passion in this industry than many, many others, which is
Yep.
a great building block. I mean, that's really where that's a people thing is
Yep.
passion, and people want to work with people. People want to work with like-minded people who care about the same things.
Mhm.
And, I think that's something pretty unique about
Absolutely.
arboriculture is just like the passion of the folks that are involved. And it's just like such a tight-knit group. It's pretty awesome to see. So, bright times ahead. I'm going to ask you one more unscripted question, then we can wrap
Yep.
up.
Yep.
You were on the sales and marketing panel
Yep.
at Winter Management. Take us inside of your roundtable discussion after the panel. Take
Yep.
us inside that roundtable discussion. What were the conversations like? And did you personally have any ahas from the discussion there?
Yeah, yes, I did have some ahas because I have felt that this momentum of what I've been trying to help people with is happening across the country faster than what I believed was. So that's a good moment. And really what we were talking about at my roundtable was marketing with a purpose. And essentially it goes back to groundwork too, and the fact that I want to help tree care companies understand that the work that they're doing, the work that they're bidding, and how they're marketing themselves to get that work is so important. I think when we're marketing our tree care company, we're a lot of times putting out like the big sexy removal job, the crane job, the thing that is flashy. Might not be what you do every day though. And when you're putting that out in your marketing, you're drawing those type of jobs. And if your company's not set up for that, you're going to take on more risk to do those jobs, and ultimately trying to help a company understand who their target client is, how they think, how they buy, and then ultimately what is your ideal service that you're doing. Because if they overlap and you have a sweet spot, and the sweet spot is where you can be efficient and safe and have more fun because those are the types of jobs with the types of people that you want to work with.
Mhm.
So our roundtable is talking about that, and it encouraged me because a lot of people at my table did say we've gone under this, thought process of trying to identify our ideal customer. we got to work on maybe our ideal service because we try to do everything for that customer when we know we can't, or whatever. That was kind of how our conversation flowed. And it is encouraging to hear that tree care companies are taking a look at that and are starting to say no more to jobs and walk away from jobs than what I think 20 years ago when I got into the insurance side and started talking to companies. It was a
Yeah.
lot more of, hey, yes, I'll do it. Let me, give me, I'll do this, I'll do this.
Right. Yeah. And there's, I imagine, it's a simple law of economics, right? When you have more leads, you have more work to do than you have people to do it, right? You owe it to yourself to do the right projects for the right clients, right? Everybody wins.
Right.
You are profitable, your crews are happy,
Yep.
have happier customers because you're doing the stuff that they need. And, everything when that overlap happens, it just kind of creates a little bit of a flywheel, which, then your marketing costs go down and a lot of other
Yep.
magical things start to happen just in terms of your efficiency. I
Right.
actually, there was a guy I saw, I forget his name, but um, he was talking, I think he was a flooring guy. I think that's right. And he said something like, why he's been so successful is because they don't do weird stuff.
Yeah.
And
Right.
he's like, we don't do weird stuff. We do not do weird stuff. We put flooring on the floor. You want flooring on your wall. We don't do it. We lose money. We screw something up and we just don't know our stuff. Like, we don't do
Right.
it. We do
Right.
not do weird stuff. I think there's something really, really powerful to that.
Yep.
There's yeah, you can build a business on some really simple principles and just finding efficiency doing the good work you want to do and are successful doing over and over and over and over again. Uh,
Exactly. Yep.
yeah, it's a timeless principle, I think, and it's good to hear that some of that thinking is creeping in. Well, I appreciate you jumping on and having a conversation, and
Absolutely.
two Midwestern guys chatting. So I love it. Appreciate you jumping on, and yeah, look forward to running into you again at some of the other events here coming up.
Absolutely. Thanks for all that you're doing. Keep it up. Love your software. I think it's a very valuable resource for these guys. And certainly appreciate the time here and we'll talk soon. Thanks.
All right, sounds good.